My name is Dr. Wendy Brown, and I am a biological science professor at Danville Area Community College.
Sure. I'm Amy Nicely, and I am one of the chemistry instructors here at DAC.
Hi, my name is Dr. Stefanie Davis. I am a rhetoric professor at Danville Area Community College.
Well, within our chemistry courses, we do have quite a few summative assessments where students will take exams at the end of a unit or at the end of the semester. So certainly looking at student performance on those exams is one major way of looking at what they've learned over the course of that period of time. But also, since some students just naturally seem not to perform well on exams, other ways that they can demonstrate that they have learned material is through the other work that they're submitting, particularly things like lab reports. This is something that they work on throughout the semester. They typically turn one in every week, and so I do look for growth as an individual as they're writing those reports and seeing the use of increased vocabulary and correct chemical terminology and more organized thought processes as they're working through those reports. Also, at the end of the semester, in several of our courses, we do have an end of semester project that includes a written and oral presentation. So students get a chance to pick a topic and really demonstrate both to me and to their classmates what they've learned about that topic, and hopefully find something that's of particular interest to them as well.
In my courses, they're all focused on teaching students how to write for an academic audience. So we do a lot of reading activities and a lot of writing activities. So I measure through, obviously at the end of a unit, the final draft of a paper, but throughout the process of writing the paper, I have scaffolded assignments that build up to that paper. So one of the other ways that I measure learning is through a tool called Perusal that I use for collaborative reading and response in my classes to help students better understand the evidence that they're going to be writing about, and that helps me to understand whether or not they're getting it so that I can make changes or provide additional instruction to help them.
To specifically measure, if you have a measure, what we do is we use those specific things to find areas that need improvement. And when they need improvement, then we go back and look at possible solutions of what may improve. So some of the things that we have specifically done from our measures that are already set up is based on feedback from the evaluation of a site supervisor. We've added guest speakers to some of the classes to help students understand a little bit more about what goes in the field. Based on feedback from our national exam data, we've changed content of courses, trying to beef up things that would make up for where we had deficiencies on national exams. But specifically for our gen ed ones, like the technology one was really helpful to help us pinpoint students that maybe weren't able to be proficient with what we were asking them to do, so that we knew which students were going to need additional help.
So there's a couple different techniques that I do for active learning. One is a think, pair, share, where they have to think about their particular answers to scenarios that I give to them, and then they pair up with other people and they discuss it with them, and then finally they share those answers out. And so I can get an assessment of what they know based on these informal assessments by them just kind of sharing what they have learned through these activities. Another example of like a major change that I have made comes from doing these formal assessments, these course level assessment forms that we fill out. One of the things I noticed in my lab class when I had to analyze the program learning outcome of technology. One of the program learning outcomes that we have is that students will be able to use technology relevant to biology. And so I assess their ability to use microscopes as a relevant technology in microbiology class. One of the things I have them do at the end of the semester on a lab practical is to do a gram stain of bacteria and then focus it under oil immersion and show it to me. Sounds simple for some people, but it really isn't. It's a very difficult process. I give them plenty of time to perfect this technique. They do it 6 or 7 times throughout the semester, but then I want to make sure that they actually are doing it by the end of the semester on the lab practical. Well, I would have them do it on the lab practical, and so many students would not be able to do it. And these were students that I knew were able to do it throughout the semester. But when it came to the lab practical, they couldn't do it anymore. And so as I was writing up my course assessment form, I wanted to focus on, okay, what can I do differently to get students to be more successful on their lab practical doing this particular technique. And my students would tell me, oh, I've done this all semester. It was, I think, a lot of pressure having them do it just on the lab practical. So I decided that I was going to try something different, and I would really give them 2 shots at it. The week before, I would tell them that they can practice their lab practical, their gram stain. If they did it successfully and focused it under oil immersion and showed it to me, it would count as their score on the lab practical. If they didn't get it, no problem. Call me over, we'll work on it together, make sure that you know what you're doing so that you can be successful if you have to do it again on the lab practical. And I went from a success rate of probably 80% prior to this change to more of a 95%. Almost all students, I maybe get 1 student a semester that was still not successful with this technique. But because I was forced to write up what I was doing in this course assessment form, and I was forced to try to do something different, at least in my own mind, I was forcing myself to, what can I really do? It really opened my eyes as to what I truly can do to make these students more successful, and it worked.
One thing that I like to do is go back through and look at the statistics that I run on any exam that has a multiple choice component. So I look at which questions were most commonly missed and go back and consider how much time was really spent in class talking about that topic, if the issue is the wording of the question, or if it's something that maybe wasn't highlighted during class as much as it should have been, and then deciding whether that means that class needs to incorporate that topic more, or if I need to think about a different question for that particular exam. But I also try to spend time, when possible, going through and just looking for new ideas. So I am a member of several different Facebook groups that have educators from different fields, and through some professional memberships, receive periodicals that have great examples of different teaching ideas that people use. So it's always great to just get ideas from other people and think about how those can be included in my classes. And I do keep a running list in the back of my planner. I just have a sheet that anytime an idea comes to mind for new ideas or changes that could be made to any of my classes, I try to jot it down there, because I don't always have the opportunity right in that moment to make the change right away. But hopefully then when we get to a semester break or a chance when I have a little bit more time to pause, I can go back to that list and remember what it was that I wanted to implement.
So the hardest part, I think, about the general education assessments when we started them here at the school was for me to figure out what they were measuring. And so at first I thought maybe it was a school-wide measure. So am I supposed to be benchmarking or measuring something that, say, rhetoric is measuring in their department, or math? But eventually, you know, I kind of figured out that I could adjust it to my area. And so, for instance, like the communications rubric, I set it up so that I measured, the first measure was measuring the students being able to communicate with patients, HIPAA law, and how that measure went. And then the next, closing the loop, or the next measure that I did was communicating certain items with a physician. And so once I figured out how to adjust them so that they fit into my program. So I guess the most important part of it is setting your measure or the plan first. Know what you're measuring and why you're measuring it. Because when I didn't understand that part, it made it really difficult. So I think the most important first step is to set up exactly what am I measuring, what are my benchmarks, you know, what do I expect to see. So for instance, some of mine is, the benchmark is the student has to get 70% or higher on whatever I'm measuring, whatever that measure might be. But you set it so that it is exact, and then if the students don't meet that measure, then you know you need a process improvement. But I think the most important part was once I figured out how to adjust it so that it fit and I understood what I was measuring.
So within chemistry, we're finding that the earlier we can start planning, the better the assessments seem to go. It really helps to have a clear picture of not just which outcome we're assessing, but exactly how we're going to assess it. So we've already mapped out for communications exactly what we're doing and what we're looking for and how we're going to align the general assessment rubric with our particular assessment that we're doing in our courses. So it shouldn't matter which instructor is performing the assessment, we should have exactly the same blueprint to follow. And so it should make for some much smoother, consistent results.
So for me, I have been working on my courses, and my motivation was actually not the kind of general education institutionally based assessment. It was because of the students that I was seeing, and they were struggling with really basic readings like newspapers, business magazines, things that, you know, general population should be able to read. And so I needed to make changes if we were going to get those students that are in my classroom where they needed to be. So I've been focused really on what improvements can I make to the curriculum in order to help better scaffold things, to get students where they need to be. And I'm paying attention to the outcomes that are really going to have the highest impact for them. So what I've noticed where they're weakest from assessing them is with reading and applying evidence and to assert a position or make a claim. So the students have to know how those basic skills of reading, pulling out the evidence and applying it. And so that's where their assessments are the weakest. So that's what I've been doing. And so since I observed that during my day-to-day operations, if you want to call it, in the classroom during a regular semester, I'm making sure that my general education assessment is focused on those areas that I know that I need to improve to help students, you know, deepen their understanding and to learn what they need to learn.
Okay, so what we did in the biology program is, and we've always done this, and we already did our critical thinking planning form, is we get together as a group and we go through all the courses that we think would be a good place to assess critical thinking. And we find our learning outcomes for that course. We plug it into the form, and then we discuss what ways do we think that we can do an assessment on critical thinking. So we do it as a team, and we come up with a plan as a team. Our program is a team effort, and so it only makes sense for us to figure out the best way to assess critical thinking as a team. So we fill these forms out as a team. And then we come back together and we discuss the data as a team. What worked, what didn't work, what things might we want to try, implement, and we finish filling out the forms together as a team. It is a team effort, so it makes the most sense for us to do it as part of a team. This last spring, we actually developed a video to help other departments fill out their planning forms for critical thinking. And so you can watch the way that the biology team does it. Maybe that would be some help to some other people, but we think our way, at least for us, has been very successful.
Well, I really feel like the work that has been done, so many people have invested in creating the processes that we need to know. The rubrics are all there. I really feel like a lot of work has gone into it, and it's very helpful. And including like videos like this, we've done a lot to help everyone learn what assessments are, what's expected of them, and like each division's little champions that are there to help are so helpful that I can't really think of anything else that would be added. It is a lot of information, you know, and you're starting out your semester and trying to get your courses ready, so I think it can be overwhelming if you don't understand it. It takes some investment and some time to really think about and plan. So I would say if you're trying to do it on your own, I would definitely team up with some people maybe that you can bounce things off of and get into a group, which I know we're planning to do probably an in-service some of that time. So I can't think of anything additional. I think that what they do now is really good, really helpful.
Well, just as my students seem to benefit from lots of concrete examples, I think we as faculty can do the same. And so I think the more opportunities we have to take a look at other instructors' assessments and how they're completing their general assessment rubrics and closing the loop forms, that's really helpful to us. I think it's helpful to not just do this all in a vacuum. So we're all doing these assessments all the time, so I think the more that we can share with each other and give good examples is really helpful. And also, I think it would be great to have set time outside of in-service. We usually get a lot of great work done in those in-service days when we're working on it together, but then the semester starts and things get kind of pushed aside, and it'd be really nice to come back and revisit in our working groups or within our divisions at some point, maybe in the middle of the semester or closer towards the end, to do a little bit more of a recap and just check in and see how things are going for everyone.